Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Morris, and I want to welcome everyone to the one and only Anissa Avens talk on strategic foresight, how to think ahead for business, not as usual, but business unusual. So we're going to be getting started here in just a few moments here, and I'm looking forward to a great chat with Anissa.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. We're going to let folks get into the room and we'll get started in just a moment. All right. I want to say thank you to our sponsors. Our Leading in a Crisis Actionable Business and HR Strategies for Navigating Crisis and Change Summit is in part available to all of us, and our speakers we have 40 plus speakers that have joined together to put this on, and our sponsors have made it possible. So I want to say thank you to the Whitmarsh Consulting Group. David Whitmarsh and his team are a group of pretty fantastic HR information technology consultants and multi-channel marketing consultants. I also want to say thank you to Insperity, HR that makes a difference. Insperity has offered to generously provide all of our attendees for this summit a free HR financial analysis report and debrief. They know that not everyone that takes advantage of this report is going to be a good fit for them. They also know that many organizations are struggling and many businesses have had to do the unthinkable, lay off their team members, and HR in particular is going to be struggling to recreate some sense of sanity. And part of that is going to be what's our new budget, considering our new trajectory looks very different. And so having a resource that can help you analyze what you're doing and support you in creating a plan just through this HR budget analysis could be very useful. So you can learn more and sign up to redeem that free report and one-on-one debrief at turnkeycoachingsolutions.net HR report. When my team and I decided that we were going to do the Leading in a Crisis Summit, it came out of that place of, okay, I'm not the kind of gal who can sit back and watch everything crumble and tumble. I need to do something. Where can I give back? And this was what came out of it. I spoke to folks like you, Jeff, and some other experts on our team. And I said, what can we provide? What are the topics that our clients and our peers are going to need at this time? And that was where this Leading in a Crisis Summit took off. We have 40 plus speakers and counting. It's now going to be every Wednesday and Thursday in April, and then at least the first couple of weeks in May at this point. So do check back at our Leading in a Crisis Summit portal for new talks happening all the time being uploaded. So Jeff, start us off.
So first of all, Anissa, I want to take just a moment to thank you and the TurnKey team. It's a high five and a distance, social distance clap. But I want to thank you and the TurnKey team that includes Sheila, Paige, and Parker for just hastily putting together something, this virtual summit that's going to be something to be remembered in history. As I share with you and your team personally, there are those that talk about doing things, and there are people that actually put things and do things in action. And you've done something very marvelous. This will be a time in history that you can look back on. Your team and organizations can say, hey, this was put together. It really helped us, and our business was transformed, and destinies were changed because of your vision and your courage. So thank you, Anissa and the TurnKey team. So high five, social distance, clap, and all those good things.
Thank you.
Am I going to introduce myself, or did you want me to talk about myself?
Yeah, I want you to share a little bit about you, and
Sure.
I want you to tell them about your talk that you did earlier last week, I suppose. Yeah.
Sure. So I had a grand opportunity last week to have Anissa host my talk that was on behavioral leadership, and it's what's called the Behavioral Superpowered Leader. And there's some things when opportunity and when crisis and change take place, there are those that can lead others through crisis, and they can find opportunity in the crisis and change. And there are those that will create their legacies and change destinies, much like you and the Turnkey team's doing right now, Anissa. Very quickly, my name is Jeff Morris. I'm the Chief Dreammaker at the Dream Smart Academy. We've been studying human behavior for about 10 years or so. And we really understand in times of crisis like this that behavior matters everywhere at all times and for everyone. And who you are right now shows up when you're stressed. So we have some great solutions for behavioral management, behavior change solutions, and all those good things. And I'm looking forward to our talk with you, Anissa.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So tell us a little bit, or I can just say, folks, that if you're have a chance to check out Jeff's replay, What is Your Behavioral Superpower? It's probably one of the replays that's getting the most activity right now because it's exactly around what Jeff was talking about, that behavior matters. And so his talk in particular is about turning crisis and uncertainty into opportunity and legacy. All right, I think you've introduced me. So let's move directly into what are we going to learn today? We're going to talk about strategic foresight. We're going to talk about what it is, why it matters, and how to develop it. We're going to talk about strategic management, and we're going to talk a little bit very briefly about what's the difference between strategic thinking, strategic foresight, strategic planning, and strategic management.
Anissa, I'm really looking forward to this talk. You know, this is around strategy and foresight and management. And I can't wait to get into this with you. I'm really excited.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. And please, anyone that's listening, don't hesitate to interrupt us. If there's a specific item you'd like to ask questions about, or if I make a statement that you're like, not so sure that applies, don't hesitate to throw me some curveballs. Jeff and I will be happy to field those. All right, we're going to learn about the pressure cooker that we're in. And I'm not going to talk about the pressure cooker because that's redundant. We know what's happening. But what I want to share with you is a model for understanding how to get through it. We're going to talk about the 3 gates of focus, and those are people, process, and profit, and why it matters to have clarity around where to put your attention right now. We're going to talk briefly about supporting your team and understanding when they need to be a builder and when they need to be a protector during this time. And then we're going to not be able to cover all the 27 challenges that every business faces, but I believe that understanding that there are 27 challenges that every business will face as it contracts or expands in business helps you to put a name to your challenges. And from there, you can put a priority on your challenges as you come out of this crisis and as you help your team come out of this crisis. And then finally, if I'm timely in driving this conversation to the end, right? We'll get to a model for quality decision making.
Anissa, when I saw your 27 challenges, I think when you get to that, it's going to be very exciting. And if I were anybody on the call, I would take this, cut it out, and paste it on my wall so that you have it someplace that you can see every single day. I can't wait for you to get to this piece here. It's going to be awesome.
Agreed. I have mine laminated.
Yes, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So real quickly, you don't have to know what those 27 challenges are to actually know what your top challenges are right now. And you don't have to use our language, but if you just take a moment and add to the chat box, what are your top challenges right now? And we don't have to make that just business. Just share whatever your challenge is right now, top of mind. And later, this will be what we get to around the 27 challenges. So I want to talk briefly about what's the difference between strategic thinking and strategic planning. Anyone have any ideas? What do y'all think is the difference there? How about you, Jeff? What's your perspective on what's the difference between strategic thinking and strategic planning?
Well, having these characteristics of strategic thinking and planning, as you know, I was a former Marine sniper. So both are critical skills to have. You have to be able to think through situations and see far enough in advance to plan as much as you can and calculate and minimize the risk, and then being able to actually execute the plan um, after you complete the plan is such critical skill sets, and some of the things I was doing when I was in the Marine Corps, and that
Yep.
still holds true today as well.
Agreed. Agreed. And Heidi says, planning is doing, thinking is just that, thinking. So here's my perspective on the differences. First of all, strategic thinking should happen hourly, especially during times of crisis. Most of us respond very quickly, and sometimes that response is aligned with our strategic priorities and our strategic plan. But during crisis, we oftentimes do not consider strategic thinking as our most important activity. And yet what I want to push back on is strategic thinking should happen hourly, whether we have a strategic plan yet or not. Here's the deal. My perspective is that no good strategic plan ever happens without strategic thinking. And so they have a symbiotic relationship, but strategic thinking can actually happen without the strategic plan. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between strategic thinking, strategic planning, and strategic foresight. So strategic foresight and strategic thinking and planning, they're all a discipline, but strategic foresight is typically a muscle that has to be built, just like thinking is a muscle that has to be built. Yes. Strategic foresight is something that has to be built. It's a philosophy. And a lot of people don't understand that a philosophy is something that you can start with and then expand. And what I mean by that is strategic foresight is about developing the capacity to create a vision on the fly, developing the ability to use your noggin, as my dad used to say, to specifically develop your crisis management plans, your crisis communication response, and as many organizations right now are going through major change. Remember that during times of crisis is when a large percentage of our really successful large organizations started. In fact, when you look at that Fortune 1000 list, about 65% of them got started in a time of downturn or crisis and change. And it was through the practice of strategic foresight that these individuals were like, I see this as an opportunity. What can we do? I love this. Do you see what Kenyatta wrote?
I do. I'll just read it really quickly. Rarely do we find men or women who are willing to engage in hard and solid thinking. There's an almost universal quest for easy answers and half-baked solution. Nothing pains some people more than having to think. That's a quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Kenyatta, thank you for sharing that. And Anissa, if I can just pause right here really quickly. So what I heard you say, and this is a question that's it's age old. So we're thinking strategic thinking is a skill set that can be grown over time. And you're not necessarily born with it, but you can grow it over time. There are some that have this more naturally while others don't, but everyone can certainly develop the skill set to be a strategic thinker. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That is exactly what you're hearing me say. And a lot of leaders think that they just had it. That their capacity for thinking strategically is natural. They don't have to develop it further, that they have made the right decisions that have gotten them this far in their career so far. And so we really do see an absence of genuine strategic thought and strategic thinking and strategic foresight, especially during times of crisis. If in fact we think we've already got it, there's a challenge, because that's what's gotten us here isn't going to get us there.
Right. Well, strategic planning is also, I'd like to get your thoughts here, is about, it comes with time as well.
Yep.
Because to plan, you probably have to have some experience in planning and maybe have lived through a crisis or two in order to lead others through it. Is that something you agree with? What's your thoughts there?
I do, to a certain extent. A strategic plan, most businesses will take a strategic plan and they'll be like, that was a lot of work. And then they put it on their shelf and then they don't get it down if they're lucky, they'll look at it again next year at that retreat. But frankly, most businesses go 2 or 3 years without even looking at that document. And so there is a need to understand that a living strategic plan is more effective than a hardbound copy that you put a lot of work into, that's perfect in every way, but not adaptable, not flexible, doesn't accommodate what happens when there's a downturn in the market, or heaven forbid, a pandemic.
I like what you said. The key word there was living strategic plan.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep. So what then is the difference between strategic thinking, strategic foresight, strategic planning, and strategic management? So I'm going to give y'all a hint. Strategic thinking plus strategic foresight plus strategic planning is strategic management. And that's where you'll hear me talk a lot today about we have individuals and businesses that do strategic planning. We have folks that have developed their ability to see around the corner, to develop foresight. And we have folks that are naturally, some more than others, to think strategically. What's missing is this component to do all three. And strategic thinking can be in the moment. How are we going to adapt to this situation? What's the priority? Strategic foresight is what's around the corner. Are we prepared? Or when we get around the corner and it's a big bad monster like what we're facing right now, what are all the options? And what is our risk? And how do we evaluate this to make the right course of action? That, of course, comes into a plan. You put all those together, and now you've got some real management principles to share with your team and to drive results.
Now, Nisa, do you think in an organization, is there just one strategic thinker, or is it a group of strategic thinkers, or a team of strategic thinkers to help get to the foresight, planning, and the management? What's your thoughts there?
I think that there used to be this concept that the folks at the top had all the answers, right? Mm-hmm. And they think up these great ideas and then they push it down. And truth be told, most organizations have to have a visionary driving it, if not several visionaries. Mm-hmm. So we are going to have our visionaries at the top, but what is evolving in the new way of doing business is recognizing that every member on our team, every employee has, as you would call it, a superpower. Mm-hmm. And when we play to our superpowers and we encourage our employees to develop their own level of contribution with their passion and their strengths and their superpower, and especially during times of crisis, we reach out to them. We say, we're in a pickle and we need all hands on deck. That means everyone on deck, everyone trying to grab an oar and begin to row. And the only way to do that is to have leadership at the top that understands they're not the only ones that have the solution.
That's so critical when you're starting to plan for crisis and change. I think we said last week in the talk that you and I were having that wise organizations, or those organizations that make it through a time like this, will actually go and innovate. We know that innovation is driven from the bottom up.
Always.
Right. And then strategies given from the top down.
Yep.
And the unique combination of those skills and those competencies will allow you to manage change and turn what we're talking about, this crisis, into opportunity.
Well, you're absolutely right. Now, when you think about, a football team, mm-hmm. A professional football team, soccer or American football, I want you to imagine that those recruiters during, the big recruiting day, name your player day, that they decided, we really only need 2 really great players. Mm-hmm. Everybody else, we'll play them because we got to, because, we got to have so many people on the field. We don't need backup. We don't need a strong bench. We don't need to foster their talents. And that's oftentimes what happens in an organization that doesn't think strategically. That's and right. Even those that want to think strategically, they're not very good at cascading those strategic priorities and helping people on the front row to the mid-level and all the way up understand, how does my role, me making this widget, contribute to the bigger vision?
That's right.
And if we're going to really drive change during a time of crisis, we have to make sure that the widget makers understand their part and their intellect and their passion and their loyalty and their superpower matters
That's
now
right.
more than ever.
Right. I had one note that I put in my notes as I was going through your deck this morning, and I said, strategic thinkers, strategic planners must engage others in their planning and learn to delegate. So great point, Anissa.
Yep.
Thank you.
Very good. So I want to talk about what makes an effective strategic foresight. First, you want people to be thinkers. You want to develop your own thinking capacity. I know that sounds, what's the word, germane? Like, duh. I don't know how to describe how often we run into people who aren't actually thinking, ourselves included. We learned yesterday in Rob Catalano's talk with Work Tango that every single day, all of us have 35,000 decisions. We make 35,000 decisions a day. And I learned that, I Googled this because I was like, really? Is that right? Is it decisions or thoughts? Maybe it's 35,000 thoughts. That sounds more appropriate. And what I learned when I Googled it, this wasn't surprising, is that I have 227.5 thoughts about food every day. So yeah, okay, Sheila's right. It's 35,000 decisions per person. So what happens is, just because I have a thought doesn't mean I am thinking.
Sure.
And we will discover that you want to develop your capacity to think. And that means that in business, you can develop your ability to gain greater business acumen simply through the act of practicing strategic foresight, practicing looking around the corner, imagining what happens if. The other thing that someone that is highly capable of strategic foresight is they've learned to make quality decisions. And they've learned to make them because they are a thinker, because they do look at all corners of a problem before barreling through their decisions. Strategic people who are great with strategic foresight create a broad perspective. They're able to look at the micro when they need to, what's going on here and now, but they also can take a broader perspective. And they can look at, how does this affect my team? How is this economy change going to affect my industry? How is this going to affect our suppliers? How is this going to affect our leaders? How is this going to affect their families? So when you take a broader perspective and start asking questions, that produces answers. Hold on, I'm gonna hold that thought. The next thing is, you gotta be a friend of complexity. And what I mean by that is, we know people who always seek simple. And simple, we know, is often the best solution to any problem is often and almost always the simplest. So I am not suggesting that we complicate the answers.
Right.
I am suggesting that we be comfortable thinking about complex things.
Well, I think we talked last week, you and I, we talked about just being comfortable in the gray zone.
Yes.
Right? Because things aren't always simple. It requires that you have to have an honest and sober assessment of where you are so you can get to where you want to go. And very quickly, if I can just add about strategic thinkers, planners, these are people in their natural behaviors. They excel at this. And that's natural for them. But then there's others where it's a learned behavior.
That's right.
Right? So they have to learn how to think strategically. And it's a muscle that they can grow over time. But it's not their most natural gifts and talents. But
thank you for that's exactly what one of the points I want to be able to make is that these bullet points here that you see: be a thinker, learn business acumen, learn how to make quality decision making, learn how to change and broaden your perspective, choose to be okay with complexity, and then this last one: be a tamer of ambiguity.
Love that.
And I wrote it specifically like that because there will never be a time when ambiguity doesn't exist. There's never going to be a time when we're super comfortable with everything in our lives and with not knowing. And some of us are more comfortable with ambiguity than others, but especially in times of chaos, it's important to, yes, we get to acknowledge that there are things we don't know and things we thought we knew. This morning will change by this afternoon. And so this is not about getting rid of ambiguity and solving all the problems through thought processes. It's about understanding that it's it's there's always going to be the unknown, and if you prepare for that, it's not so scary.
Sure. Can I give you a Jeff Morris quote?
Yeah.
There's one thing certain about uncertainty, and is uncertainty is certain. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. Well said. Finally, you want to be a what ifer. And what I mean by that is it really is the practice of, okay, what if we don't survive this? But what if we do? What if I have to lay off employees? But what if I don't? And so your mind will automatically go to, I just want you to think of anything that's in a what if. What if I ate oranges today? Your mind immediately goes to what? It goes to the vision of you eating an orange. What if I rode an elephant today? Your mind immediately puts you on the elephant. And if you're not a visual thinker, then you still are auditory. You are still hearing yourself on the elephant, etc. The same thing happens when you begin to use the what if question in a strategic manner. But here's the tip. Most natural what ifers go to the negative. But if you're going to be a strategic thinker and who's developing your strategic foresight during times of crisis, you don't just go to the what if, you must also go to the possibility. And the big thinkers, the big organizations that have mastered navigating through chaos, they have their visionaries whose entire job is to look into the future and see opportunity. And so that's my only caveat. You want to be a complete what ifer, but it's got to be balanced. Yes, you want to prepare for the negative, but you also want to hold the space for what's possible. And the effective questions around what if are about what if we make it? What if this turns into an opportunity? What if we had an opportunity to buy out one of our competitors now? What if we could collaborate with one of our competitors? What if that organization over there who has our same exact target market, what if we reached out to them and we use our salespeople and they use theirs, and all of a sudden we've got a collaborative, you get what I'm saying? Absolutely. You will solve every problem there is known to man by becoming a what ifer. So we've already spoken about this. We're just going to recap it. Developing strategic foresight means you're going to start embracing the uncertainty. You're going to choose to be curious. You're going to be imaginative, and you're going to let yourself be imaginative. And as I was just saying, you're going to what if the you know what out of it. You're going to broaden your perspective intentionally. You're going to go micro, macro, micro, macro. And if you do that enough, it becomes a part of how you think. You're going to study strategy, reading biographies of really successful or really inspirational people. They were strategic. They may not have called what they do strategic, but they were strategic and they thought strategically and they developed the skill set to solve problems and solve challenges. You're going to study successful companies and the models by which organizations use to create success. You're also going to study growth models because they exist. There's a lot of science about what organizations do to be successful. And you want to know those models. And you're going to be a master asker. What can I do for you? What's going on in your life? What's going on in your business? How can I support you? Employee number 800 or employee number 1. You want to develop this curious approach to your relationships right now and the relationship with your business.
These are all great points, Anissa. One that sticks out for me is broaden your perspective. As leaders, perspective is everything. And you've already said this, that we get what we focus on, right? We manifest what we see in our mind's eye. So as a leader, when you're starting to plan and you have strategic foresight and all the things that you mentioned before, just remember your perspective is what leads change and how others can be given a clear pathway forward. That's going to provide encouragement and support. So all these are great points. Did anyone here on the call, did one of these stick out to you? Is this an aha moment with any one of these points? Share it in your chat with us. That'd be awesome.
Please. I'm going to give you guys an immediate resource. I don't know how long ago I read this book. It is How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, but it changed who I was at the core. And one of Michael J. Gelb's, that's the author's quotes, is genius is made, not born. And human beings are gifted with an utmost unlimited potential for learning and creativity. And, you know, tell you a little bit of backstory about me. My father was an entrepreneur. His father and mother were entrepreneurs. Their parents were entrepreneurs. And then my mother's family and her parents and grandparents were entrepreneurs. And so it was just a part of my DNA, so to speak, to understand that that's what you do. You create a valuable product or a valuable service and offering, and you go into business. That's what I did. But one of the things that my father did when I was growing up, I thought he was just the meanest old man ever. He would say to me, you know, actually he'd take something like a magazine and hit me over the head with it and say, use your noggin. And he'd say, I don't know how you got to be so old. And he'd say, you couldn't, okay, forgive me, but these were his words. You couldn't pour piss out of a boot and do it the same way twice. Why aren't you thinking? So he literally, and those are, you know, it sounds abusive, but he built, you know, my siblings and I are all go-getters, and we all are very resourceful, and we're all thinkers. And how he trained us to be thinkers was by constantly looking ahead, behind us, to the side, at all angles. We would be driving when we were learning how to drive, and he would take a piece of paper or something, and he would put it over the rear view window or mirror, excuse me. And he'd say, what color is the car behind you? And if you didn't know, you got in trouble. So we developed this capacity to know there's a red car over there. There's a 18-wheeler over there. The car behind me is 100 feet behind me, and it just turned left and it's blue. And there's 8 in front of me, right? You just developed this because you didn't want to get in trouble by my dad. So you just developed this broadened perspective. So then when I read this book, I realized that all the things that he was aiming to teach us, there's a formula for, and it really does enable people to develop their thinking capacity. So I encourage you to get this book, but I want to give you one tool from this that I use. I wouldn't say I use it now on a daily basis, but I certainly use it on a weekly basis. And I particularly use it during times of crisis and change and problem solving. And that is, you just sit down and you write 100 questions for your life. You write 100 questions around a problem. And of course, those of you who know, what is that quote? There it is. Albert Einstein's quotes. If I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on a solution, I would spend the first 55 minutes determining the proper question to ask. For once I know the proper question, I could solve the problem in less than 5 minutes. And so developing the ability to ask questions and write down a list of what now, what if, how would this work? How does the brain work? How do people work? How can I make my team feel better? It's better to write down 100 questions than to write down 2 or 3 or even 10 that you think are the right ones to focus on, only to find out later that wasn't the right focus at all.
Kenyatta makes a great point here. Anissa, I'm gonna read a couple of things from our chat. Kenyatta talked about behavioral fingerprints, and that's some of the language that we use in our behavior superpowers talk. And we talk about the ability to have a higher tolerance for abstract versus concrete thinking. There are people like me who are reflective thinkers, and I think very concretely, where you as a influencer, you're gonna be more abstract in your thinking processes. So when you can bridge the two together, you'll come up with a very viable solution because of the fingerprint that everyone brings to the table there. And then Heidi said, the what-ifer, getting back to your point, must also see possibilities and not just the negative. Then they can see the opportunities. Would you care to expound a little more on this point that Heidi's just made?
Yeah, just that I agree wholeheartedly. We all know what-ifers that focus on the negative, and we also know that they're not necessarily the best problem solvers. They may solve problems, but they're not the best problem solvers. The best problem solvers are the folks who are saying, what if I could reach the moon? What if this were an opportunity? What if the universe has put this in front of me for me to expand who I am, grow who I am, become my best, drive my business to the next level, innovate, take that great idea I've been thinking about and get it out off the shelf and put it in front of me. Those are the what ifers that are going to take this as an opportunity.
Sure. So what I just heard you say when we talk about concrete versus abstract thinkers. So an abstract thinker would see the possibility of getting to the moon, right? And then a concrete thinker like myself would go, okay, that's a great idea, but let's put the systems and the methodology in place to actually get to the moon. So again, it's about the union of those two types of thinkers in an organization that bring about the best change and solutions.
And from my perspective, understanding where my gaps are, it allows me to then go learn about systems thinking and to develop strategy and close the gap. I don't believe that any of us should rely on what we were born with. And in fact, I think those of us who do tend to fall short of our real greatness. So I want to quickly give you guys a model for understanding where we were, hopefully, prior to the pandemic. This is what a healthy business looks like. There's 20% preparation in your organization, 70% performance, and 10% pressure. That's what really great organizational culture strives for. Now, this is unhealthy company movement, right? You've got 10% preparation. You're really, really, really trying to perform, but there's a lot of pressure for whatever reason. Not enough cash flow, too much competition, too much strife in the ranks of your employees, lack of engagement, high turnover, whatever it is that's causing that pressure. You want to, in a normal day and age, you're wanting to alleviate the pressure so you can focus more on performance and have enough, at least 10% more time on preparation to be effective. So now this is what troubled company movement looks like. And that's what all of us are experiencing right now. There's no industry that's not affected. Even those who are prospering right now are still impacted in ways that we can't possibly understand. So the troubled company is continually trying to prepare. So they typically will aim to be more strategic and aim to prepare more. But unfortunately, the pressure we're under, the pressure of the situation of our clients not paying us, or our employees being sick, or us having to figure out how to keep our employees safe, or taking our employees all remote, or gosh, if you're in sales, knowing that nobody wants you to sell them anything right now. Back off. We're not only are our wallets closed, but I also don't want to be sold. Stop it. Right? So there's this pressure that doesn't have any real viable solutions at the moment. So, but if you see this as a model, what you've got to know is that every ounce of percentage that you focus on the pressure, as you alleviate the pressure that your organization is in, whether that's through crisis management or crisis communication, regular communication and compassion and empathy with your employees, but also communicating to your clients and others, whether it's finding a way to put your time and attention on something that matters right now, the more you can alleviate the pressure, that pressure cooker we're on, and release some of that, it's steam and it's intense right now. And I don't know that this is the best solution, but my son told me yesterday that, that alcohol sales are up 250%. Right. And Texas is leading the pack. So that's one way to alleviate the pressure. Not what I'm recommending, but.
I love this graphic. When I was looking at your deck this morning, this says a mouthful here, and a picture's worth 10,000 words. I say this picture's worth 100,000 words. This is very well put together and very well said by you, Anissa. This is awesome.
Well, and the reason I put this here is because if we're thinkers and you think about what this means, it means this is a season, not a forever. This is not the zombie apocalypse, Sheila. She hates zombies. This is our moment in time, and it will pass. It always does. Right. You know, we knew winter was coming at some point, and here it is. And our job is to reduce the pressure from 70 down to
Mm-hmm.
40, and then eventually we'll have new momentum. But if you can see this as a model and share this with your team, we're at 70% pressure. What would it look like if we were at 65%? What would it look like if we reduced that 10% more? And what activities, behaviors, decisions will support a 10% reduction in that pressure? Those are the ways that right now strategic organizations are going to manage the emotions and manage the shifts that need to happen and happen quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to share with you guys, as I mentioned earlier, you want to study growth models. If you want to develop your strategic foresight, develop your strategic capacity, then you want to study. There's some fantastic growth models out there, one of which is called the 7 Stages of Entrepreneurial Growth. And every single stage has very predictable items that you have to focus on, very predictable challenges. And this model is from the research that James Fisher did with about 500 organizations he met with many CEOs and over 500 organizations. And he found that there are certain items that always happen between stages. And these numbers here correspond to the size of your organization or the size of your business unit. So if you have a marketing department that has 59 employees, then you're a stage 5 department. Stage 5's primary focus is about integrating people, integrating ideas, integrating processes, getting ready for the next big strategic push. If you're a stage 6, your focus is on strategy and growth. And these wind tunnels and flood zones you're looking at, they all have different things that will happen. In between stage 1 and 2, you've got a flood of activity, so much so that you don't have the people or the processes necessarily to fulfill the work, for example. Whereas when you move from a stage 2 to a stage 3, you're in a wind tunnel. Your things are confused. What used to work isn't working anymore. The culture is shifting. So we don't have enough time to go through all of that. But what I want you to know is that there's models out there that can help you find answers and help you predict success of your organization. And here's the deal. That complexity we talked about, complexity in an organization equates to people. If you're a one-man shop, you might have a difficult time right now in business, but you don't have as much of a difficult time as if you had 500 employees. Or we have a friend who just laid off 718 of their 800 employees that they've had 20-something years. That's a difficult situation.
Absolutely.
So strategic management during a crisis, all business challenges will fall into one of 3 areas. They're going to fall into what we call the 3 gates of focus. It's going to be profits, people, or process. The importance of that is because if you can take your challenge and then say, is this a process challenge? Is this a profits challenge? Is this a people challenge? In our current situation, it's probably all. But each challenge you're facing will have a priority strategy. Mm-hmm. And depending on the challenge, you're going to want to choose. Do I focus on profits at this moment when my employees are wondering if they're going to still have a job tomorrow? Or do I focus on communicating to my people? Mm-hmm. You want to go ahead?
I think all 3 are important, like you said, yep. Anissa, because people want a clear pathway forward, which is the process, and understanding, again, we keep going back to this behavior superpower stuff. It's really the essence of people and how they show up and how you show up and how they expect you to show up, and then get into, how do we keep our doors open?
That's right.
If we can keep our doors open, and then if we can't, what do we need to do to get them back open? So this was a great graphic as well, the 3 gates of focus. I like this a lot.
Thank you. So there's also the right targets. You want to identify the right targets and proactively prepare for the inevitable challenges. And there are 7 predictable stages of what we call growth in business. And growth means change. So in this case, it's expansion or contraction. There are only 5 challenges. There's 27 I'm going to show you 2, but at any given moment, every organization, where they are with their people, with their strategy, there's only 5 that will rise to the level of that's our primary focus. What's beautiful about knowing this is the whole concept that I've got 27 challenges to solve shuts me down before I even begin. It's too much. I mean, that's, how do you eat the elephant? Well, I'm going to eat all 27 right now. Right. And that's how a lot of us respond in times of crisis. There's too much to do. No more than 5 specific, actionable challenges deserve your attention at any given moment.
So some of the comments that we're getting here, Anissa, the deck will be available for download soon as those are interested. And people are making comments about how engaging your deck is. So
I'm so glad.
Great job.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yes.
So we're going to briefly go through those gates of focus. The profit revenue gate. It's about predicting growth by maximizing and anticipating profit, revenue, protection, and capacity issues. Your people gate, obvious, but it's important to understand even now, it's about building competency and innovation through conscious development of your people. Even if you're only hanging on to your last 5 employees, you're going to want to attend to them through development and communication and making them a priority. Then there's about process. There are times when process has to become your first priority. It may or may not be today during a crisis. Typically during a crisis, you're going to focus on, okay, I got to keep this cash flow thing happening or I won't have people to develop. And in some cases, if you're a larger organization and you've got multiple investments that are feeding each other, then it may just be about how do we retain, because there will be spring. This is winter, but there will be a spring after the winter. So understanding that you've got your builders and your protectors in your organization. And your builders are those folks who they constantly they're risk tolerant. And Jeff, what would you call those who are risk tolerant in their behavior superpower?
Everyone has a daring versus careful. It's one of the things that we measure in our behavior superpowers. So depending again on your background, your experiences, and your natural behavior, you'll be either more daring or you'll be more careful. So it just depends on your background you come from, your experiences, your education, all those things that play into your life. But those who are strategic thinkers will tend to be more daring in general. And if I could give you those 5 characteristics of what and how a strategic thinker shows up very quickly, they'll be take charge versus cooperating, right? They're going to be more willing to take charge because that's what they do. They're going to be more reserved versus outgoing. And so they're always thinking like myself. So they appear to be standoffish, but they're just not guarded. They're thinking about their process. They're going to be more fast-paced than planned.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why they have to have people who are thinking strategically in their corner so that they can add to what they see, strategic thinkers see in their mind. And then they're going to be a little more skeptical versus trusting because strategic thinkers want to know the facts.
Yeah.
So they show up that way very intentionally, and that's how they most naturally show up. So thank you for asking me my thought there.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And what I want to say is there's nothing wrong with someone who is more reserved and cautious.
That's right.
There's also nothing wrong with someone who is risk tolerant. We all know, if you think about Elon Musk and his grand adventures, that man is super risk tolerant. The moon, let's do this. Electronic cars, let's make it happen. And you have to have that in order right now to drive through crisis. You're going to have a little bit of both. Builders are all about how do we increase the sales? How do we make things happen? How do we collaborate? Yes, I know that this is a big craps table, but we got to take bold action. While your protectors are like, hang on, let's be cautious. Let's slow things down. They're much more risk adverse. But here's what I want you to imagine. When an organization is top heavy in protectors during times of massive action is required for survival, it's very difficult to survive. At the same time, you got to have your protectors who say, hold up there, buddy. We're not all going to Tahiti just because you think that's the best course of action, right? So there is a balance. And I bring that up because most protectors don't understand a builder's motive. They don't understand risk tolerance. And so it's difficult for them to get on the building mindset, and vice versa. Most builders are like, I got $10 left in my pocket. Let's make this happen. And you have to have you have to understand those two must work together to slow your roll and build that roller coaster so that it can survive beyond the first run.
Anissa, you in your previous slides, you talked about people, process, or profit. This falls right into the people category, because
Yes.
when we study business and just through studies in general, 87% of poor performance in business and in life is around the area of behavioral difference.
Yes.
So it's important that you get a handle on who's daring versus who's careful, who's relationship oriented versus who's results oriented.
Yes.
So this is exactly what you're talking about here.
That is exactly right. That's exactly right. So here we get to the sharks, right? This is about those 27 challenges, and they really fall into alignment, execution, and implementation. When we look at the 27 challenges, you want to be able to force your company to put words to the top critical issues. You want to be able to talk to people and provide an opportunity to see how does the leadership team define our company's top challenges, and then cascade that into the organization. You want to force discussion that will move your culture, your company, your people into alignment around those goals. When everyone is scattered about what the priorities are and there's so many challenges, people will take a bite into whatever the challenge is that's in front of them. And it may or may not be strategic at all. In fact, most of the time in crisis, we're going to resort to what we know. And resorting to what we know isn't necessarily what's right or best strategic priority for the organization. Looking at the 27 challenges is going to allow your leadership team to build confidence as they proactively tackle critical issues. So I know you're not going to be able to read all of these. There is a handout actually on the Summit portal that you can download. I think actually if you're on the portal right now, you can actually see where that is, and it'll show you what those 27 challenges are. But just as we've been talking about, study a model, understand people, understanding that there's only 27 challenges that everything you're facing fall into. And if you tackle the right challenge in the right order, then you're going to survive this, and spring is going to look mighty pretty. So earlier I asked you to identify just the couple of challenges or one challenge that you're faced with right now. If you would, type those into the chat box. And we only have a few more minutes, so I'm going to get right into our quality decision making. So quality decision making. You know, there's an adage that I aim to live by, and that is that my willpower is strengthened when my decisions are pre-made. And the only way I can really pre-make decisions and still make quality decisions is by understanding what my values are. So
Anissa, would you say that again?
Yeah.
I'm reflectively thinking on that.
That's great.
Say that again.
So willpower is strengthened when decisions are pre-made. And the only way I can really pre-make a decision is by understanding that I have certain values that are non-negotiable.
Right.
And therefore, all of my decisions are run past my values before I make them.
Sure.
And does that make sense?
Makes total sense. Commitment and conviction, correct?
It is. If I don't understand what my values are, then all of my decisions are, you know, they might work, but they might not. For me, my values are be a person of my word. My top three: be real, be honest, and do my best. And you'll see that this is a picture of rock, paper, scissors.
Yes.
And my top value is be a person of my word. And there are times when doing my best supersedes being a person of my word. Yes. I may say, I've got your back on this, and the best that I've got didn't quite have your back. But if you know that every single decision has to be aligned with your values, then your decisions are not as difficult as if you don't know what your values are.
So this is a lens by which you make decisions and live your life, is what I'm hearing you say.
That's exactly right. And what I find is that organizations that support people in learning what their values are and fostering good values have people that are empowered to make quality decisions. And of course,
Absolutely.
the authority to make decisions does not qualify as the ability to make quality decisions.
That's very powerfully spoken. Yes, that is.
So I'm going to skip over to this next part because we are running out of time. If you have never seen a decision matrix, I encourage you to just Google in images decision matrix. I use this all the time. Down the left side here, you're gonna list your criteria, what matters to you. Across the right, you're going to say, what are my options? You know, a lot of folks are saying, do I hold steady? Do we do furloughs? Do we do layoffs? Do we switch gears? Your role in this kind of decision making is to add up the numbers, 5 being the best. Well, when you look at your hierarchy of values, what you're going to find is some of our values are very high: authenticity and boldness and faith and fun and happiness and love and justice, right? But then you see these that are in bold here. You know, acrimony is my safe place, that bitterness that some of us hold just for life in general, or being right is more important than being happy, or losing my cool is my trademark, or I'd rather guard against disappointment, or winning at all cost is important. What happens when an organization doesn't use values-based decisions, or when individuals don't use value-based decisions, is conscious values, I should say. Their alternate values are what drive the decisions. We know a friend who is working for an organization whose leaders, 3 or 4 of the top leaders got sick with coronavirus, and they didn't communicate it to the employees. They just went radio silent. No one could get a hold of them. No one could find them. No one knew where they were. No one knew if they were alive or dead. And then, of course, the rumors begin, and HR says, oh, they're fine, only to find out later that they're not fine. They've got the virus. And so employees began to feel obviously disconnected and like, why, what is it that they're afraid of? Are they afraid that we'll worry for them? Or are they afraid we won't come to work because we were just around them last week? And so either way, their values were, it is more important for us to, I mean, we get to fill in the blanks. It's more important for us to maintain our work than to scare people away from work. Or it's more important for us to maintain our privacy than to let people know who are next to us, whether or not they were safe. And so that's an example of what happens when the wrong values inform our decisions. All right, so I think we are wrapping up. Any other questions that I might be able to answer, or what are your thoughts, Jeff?
I thought this was very wonderfully done. It's a hand clap and a high five. I've grown as a leader today in many aspects, from strategic thinking, planning, foresight, the 27 challenges. I've never seen that before. And I thought it was magnificently done, Anissa. Oh. Great job.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. What I want to share with people is that we are doing for clients strategic, I wouldn't call it a retreat. I would call it a massive strategic alignment opportunity. And the work that we do is a data-driven strategic alignment process where your team comes together. They answer questions around those 27 challenges, around the organization's builder protector mindset, around how they focus on the people, profit, or process. And then through that, they design a strategy for resolving the situation. It gets a lot of folks involved in the thought process, in the decision, and from there you have greater clarity and predictability about navigating this change. So if this is something that we can support you with, we are doing a name your own price on it. Typically this is a multi-day event with a lot of intense processing and facilitation. And what we're doing instead is, what do you need right now? How can we serve? How can we help? And the name your own price means it's not free. but you get to decide what the value is. The only thing we are asking is for expenses. The assessment costs us a little bit of money, and of course the coach that we'll work with costs a little bit of money. And then if there are other, printing and stuff expenses. But I would say that is our way of serving. And if we may be supportive, we look forward to hearing from you. All right, that's what I've got. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And Jeff, thank you.
Awesome. Great job, Anissa. Great job, Turnkey team. Looking forward to more talks in the future.
Brilliant. Thank you everyone for joining us. I look forward to your feedback. Take care. Thank you, Jeff.
Great job, Anissa. You rocked it.
Thank you.